What's up, everybody? Welcome to the weekend roundup. I said it right as the MLS postseason was starting. You look at history, you look at the track record, you look at the things MLS Cup winners have in common, you look at the numbers, you look at this season. There were two teams that legitimately had a chance in the sense that they fit all the criteria, checked all the boxes. Is the first season in a long time that's been the case. There's always a team, whether it's Colorado Rapids last season, for example, not having the firepower, and the New England Revolution not necessarily playing a style that's conducive to postseason success, or Darlington Nagbe's injury in 2020, where I still firmly believe the Crew were the best team all season long. It just didn't reflect in the regular season standings because Darlington Nagbe was hurt. You can go on and on and on. There were two teams. There was not that third team this season where I looked at and said, that's sort of your dark horse. That team you need to get behind. They've got a real shot to go on and actually win MLS Cup. Not win a couple games, not get to MLS Cup. Win the entire thing. There was not another team this season. It was about the number one seeds. This ridiculous streak of number one seeds failing to get to MLS Cup time and time again was going to end, and if we were finally going to get both of them there for the first time in forever, it was going to be this season. I still wasn't convinced both of them were actually going to do it because this is MLS, and sometimes just illogical things happen, and it's kind of impossible to prevent that. But we got a very logical postseason here. And both one seeds ended up in MLS Cup. This is going to be absolutely phenomenal. Not going to get into the matchup too much here. I'm going to save that for the Touchline Talk show on Wednesday. So be sure to hit that subscribe button to get all of my MLS preview content and MLS Cup reaction post-game next weekend. So I want to focus more on the actual semifinals here. LAFC get past Austin without any major issues. Once again, Austin not built to come from behind. Didn't really have an answer after LAFC scored. Set pieces made the difference in this game. Got LAFC that couple goal cushion. They had another one at the end. And this is further confirmation. What makes this LAFC team different than its predecessors and why they are finally in MLS Cup is they've got plan B and plan C. They've got multiple ways to win. They don't just need to control a game with possession, and if that doesn't work, all of a sudden they're in trouble. That's not what this team is. It's the big change Steve Surindo has been able to accomplish, and the way the roster's built, it allows them to win multiple. This game, Austin conceded a lot of possession and a lot of territory. They found a way to get through on set pieces, which for the most part this season they've been very, very good on. LA Galaxy, it was more that transition game that they've become so lethal at because they don't need the ball. They don't have 70% possession every single game anymore. This was a game where Austin was giving them the ball. They're able to do that too because you have so many amazing attacking players and because they're really good situationally on set pieces. There really isn't too much to say other than they were brilliant. They've been really good this postseason in the couple games you've seen them. Congratulations. This is why they spent all this money. You even have multiple options at center back that you can kind of match up the way you want. And Giorgio Chiellini came off as a tactical change at halftime because you didn't need his ability to play balls into the channel and kind of unlock that low block from Austin because you already had goals. You needed to be able to deal with what was theoretically going to be the pressure coming from Austin playing from behind. And it just never really materialized, so Chiellini would have been fine. They were just far superior. But all of that stuff, it's so so important. It's why I keep bringing it up time and time again, and it's been LAFC's issue. It's why I was hesitant to believe they could do it until I actually saw it. And you've seen 2 games of it now. This is a team way better equipped to go win this trophy than even the best teams Bob Bradley had. For that very reason. They are not reliant on one style of play and things working exactly how they want, because that's not how you win in a single game elimination chaotic format designed to be unpredictable. You've got to be able to adapt and adjust, and LAFC are doing just that. And they will host the Philadelphia Union in MLS Cup. I do want to mention this one more time because it ended up determining where this game was being played, which may very well end up determining who wins it. Just about any other place in the world, the Union win the Supporters' Shield on goal difference, and the Union are hosting this game. Not the way it is. Can't do anything about it. We're going to LA. But this Union team deserves that recognition because of how dominant they were in the goal difference department. It's just another one of those things about Major League Soccer. You got to embrace what makes this league different. Part of that is the sort of doubling down on wins as the tiebreaker. Everybody knew it going in, but I do want to mention that since these 2 teams are playing each other. In terms of the Eastern Conference Final, not the prettiest first half in the world. NYCFC down some key players. That needs to be acknowledged. Maxime Chanot at the back, Talis Magno. Did get Maxi Morales out there. Overall, Nick Cushing seemed pleased with how the injury situation ended up playing out, considering it could have been much worse. But you also can't overlook those injuries. The same way you can't overlook all the guys that both teams were missing when these 2 teams played in the conference final last season. Despite all of that, NYCFC, again, one of those transition moments. They're not a team built to play in transition, but this postseason they've been doing it really well. And it just kind of a couple passes, and all of a sudden, it's a great layoff to Maxi Morales, and Maxi Morales does what he's been doing this entire postseason, which is scoring goals. He gets it past Andre Blake. And this was kind of a strange game because it was the exact reverse of last season. Last season, the Union got the goal kind of out of nowhere. That sort of weird Kasper Shabilko putting pressure in, but you never were convinced. And as soon as NYCFC needed to go, they stepped it up. Morales got a goal, and then there was an onslaught until the inevitable second one came. This time it's the Union kind of get that first goal out of nowhere as they're starting to build up this pressure, knowing they're really going to have to go for it in the final, 20 or so minutes of the game. Julian Carranza steps up big time, incredibly smart to realize that space was there if they took the free kick. NYCFC trying to get substitutes on the field and get organized. Union catch them sleeping. It's 1, then it's 2, then it's 3, and it's game over. In between, though, was an incredibly important moment, the defining moment of this game that cannot get overlooked, which is the save Andre Blake made. Now, Andre Blake being who Andre Blake is, that's a save you've seen him make a million times. It's nothing out of the ordinary for him, which is not to diminish the save. It's a testament to how great he is. He makes the extraordinary look ordinary. But if that goes in, we are talking about a completely different game. And you heard the roar in that stadium when he did make that save. And all of a sudden, here comes the Union attack, the floodgates open, and they end up getting a pretty easy win. In a game where they were staring down another incredibly disappointing defeat at home. You talk about why Andre Blake has a case for MVP, why Jim Curtin keeps pushing this, why Andre Blake is an MVP finalist. Not only do the metrics back up how valuable a goalkeeper can be, that's discussion for a different day, but it's those kind of moments that can win you games. Now, of course, he didn't win this on his own because they still had to score the goals. But I have a hard time believing this ends 3-1 in favor of the Union if Andre Blake doesn't make that save. It's a perfect example of why he is a legitimate MVP candidate. aside from being the best goalkeeper in this league. And Julian Carranza had himself a game. Didn't do too much other than his typical hard work in the first half, but gets the first goal, sets up the second. Really good awareness and anticipation and understanding of what was about to happen. And this game goes back to the point I've been trying to make about this Union team. And I haven't really talked about it too much specifically. So I want to get into it for a moment here. Those individual moments, Carranza finding that space on the first goal, the way Carranza and Gazdag interacted for the second. Those are the kind of things the Philadelphia Union of 2 seasons ago didn't have. And the Philadelphia Union last season didn't get to display in the postseason because half of their team was in COVID protocol. You have to have those kind of players who can get you out of those kind of difficult spots. Because you're going to, even if you're only playing 3 games, you're going to run into some kind of adversity. It's not going to go perfect for you. It's what LAFC had to deal with in El Tráfico, and the Union came up against it here. It's not like they were creating all kinds of great chances and you just knew it was a matter of time before they scored a couple goals. They didn't even get to that point because they figured it out so quickly and just those, again, individual moments of brilliance, the guys who can just create something out of nothing. That is what separates this Union team from the previous ones. They've always been great collectively, which is a tremendous platform for success in the regular season. But you've got to have the individual talent. You've got to have the difference makers in the postseason to erase some of those mistakes and some of those unfortunate things you just run into because it's a sport with a small margin of error when you get to the postseason. That's the beauty of the playoffs, right? One thing goes wrong and it can end your season. So you've got to have guys who can kind of erase some of that and make up for those moments where things aren't going your way. That's Gazdag, that's Carranza, that's Ura. That's what makes this Union team different outside of having the best defense in the history of the league. It was kind of all on display in this game. And so here we go. Union at LAFC. This is the matchup. These are the 2 teams. It was the year of the number 1 seed coming in. We got them both. We're going to have a deserving champion, which is always exciting and not necessarily always the case. It's just the way this league works. But this is going to be a phenomenal final. Cannot wait. Congratulations, LAFC. Congratulations, Philadelphia Union. We're going to have a first-time MLS Cup champion in under a week as I record this. Cannot wait. A couple other things I want to mention before I end today, going to the Premier League. Specifically talking about coaches here. Haven't addressed the Jesse Marsch job status, really. Mentioned it briefly, I think, at one point. I'm not going to talk about it too much unless he actually does get fired. But when you go into Anfield and beat Liverpool, you better believe I'm going to talk about it. The first thing that needs to be acknowledged here, they were never one of the worst 3 teams in the league. Never. I don't care what the actual points on the board say. First of all, they always had games in hand too. They had some difficult losses. A majority of Premier League fans will tell you they got robbed against Arsenal. They've been fine. Fine after losing Rafinha and Calvin Phillips, who I continue to believe does not get enough credit for how important he was to that team. And Patrick Bamford is as wasteful as any player in the Premier League so far this season. And they were still fine. Now, can you just continue to let yourself sit in the relegation zone? No, I get that. It's the reality of that league in particular when it comes to the finances and the consequences of being relegated. If you're in the relegation zone, there are going to be questions about the manager's future. It's just the reality of the situation. Now, we're also in October, not, February. It was just never as bad as people were making it out to be. That's first. Second, I will acknowledge, especially after the good start they got off to, I didn't think they were going to be sitting there in the relegation zone. I thought they were going to be comfortably somewhere between 10th and 14th for most of the season because they got off to that good start. They had a bad stretch where they dropped a bunch of points they shouldn't have dropped. That can't be ignored. But to have that kind of performance at that venue, in this situation, when that team could have very easily given up on Jesse Marsch and just kind of run out the clock until that managerial change got made, says an incredible amount about Jesse Marsch's managerial and leadership skills and his ability to motivate. And this is something I keep coming back to with him. It's why I'm such a big believer in his, and will continue to go to bat for him even if he gets fired from this job. Tactically, has it been spectacular? No, there are certainly criticisms that are fair. You can level at Jesse Marsch for the way things have gone so far this season. But he knows what he's doing. He has a clear plan. That's a big thing for me. And Jim Curtin even said this on a podcast. I was listening to a clip that got put on Twitter. You can talk about tactics all you want. At the end of the day, coaching is about leadership, relationships, and motivation first. If you get to this level, you're tactically competent. Now, are some better than others? Sure. But I'll take somebody who's still evolving tactically, who isn't at the highest level tactically, when they can get a team to buy in consistently the way Jesse Marsch does. Look at the way Tyler Adams responded after that final whistle. And I think the second guy that ran over to him was Rasmus Christensen. The guys who have been around him for a long time and not just the U.S. internationals. That says something. The way this team has gone to bat for him says something. Now, at the end of the day, you got to put points on the board and you got to stay out of the relegation zone. It's the reality of the situation. It's fair to say, considering what some of these teams that we didn't expect that much from this season are doing, Leeds should be in a better position than they are. That's fair. But there is plenty of time. Firing a manager for the sake of firing a manager isn't going to solve anything. And the patience and the belief paid off in a big way with a win at Anfield. It's just, that is the Jesse Marsch experience, I feel like. Even with all of the struggles and all of the criticism, that team never quit on him. He didn't quit on them. And they get a massive win in the middle of this really tough stretch of games they absolutely needed. Second manager I want to talk about quickly is Eddie Howe. Newcastle have now won 5 of 6, the other game being a scoreless draw at Manchester United. Their only loss in the Premier League is at Liverpool. They have the best defensive record in the league. When Eddie Howe was at Bournemouth, Eddie Howe turned Bournemouth into one of the most prolific goal-scoring teams outside the top 6. I'm going to say that again. Go look at the amount of goals Bournemouth scored. Eddie Howe turned Bournemouth into one of the most prolific goal-scoring teams in the Premier League outside of the Big 6. And there was one season, if I remember correctly, where they even scored more goals than Manchester United. I will never understand why there were all of these questions about whether he was the right person for the Newcastle job or was up for this kind of challenge. After 5 or 6 seasons or whatever it was, he caught some bad breaks at Bournemouth. After, managing with razor-thin margins and continually getting his team into safety with points to spare and scoring boatloads of goals. His track record makes it logical when you look at the individual improvement you've seen from these Newcastle players, the ones who have been there. That is what he does. He is outstanding at getting the most out of what he's working with. And now he's working with more talent and way more financial resources. And so the ceiling is way higher. This is how it's supposed to work, right? You do a lot with a little, and then you get the better opportunity with the resources that allow you to go to that next level. That's all that happened here. All of this makes sense. Now, can you take Newcastle from where they were to where they are now, competing for a top 4 spot, without the ownership change? Of course not. It is part of the story. It cannot be ignored. It is Newcastle at this point. But from an on-field perspective, I don't want to get into sort of the politics and the cultural ramifications of it. You also aren't getting to where Newcastle are without some of those purchases, specifically Bruno Guimaraes and Kieran Trippier, who have both been phenomenal. But again, you go look at those 11s. It's a bunch of guys who were dismissed by most of the Premier League, I would argue, until Eddie Howe got there. Now Miguel Almiron is scoring every single week. Joe Linton was their player of the season last year as a midfielder. Who saw that coming? Coaching matters. Eddie Howe is a phenomenal coach. He did everything possible to prove to you he should be at the top of the list when something like this, an opportunity like this opens. He showed you how much he can get out of players. Now he just has a much higher ceiling and is going to continue to get even more talent because of the financial resources now at his disposal. There is just, I will never understand that part. There is nothing shocking about this to me. I didn't necessarily think they would be this good this quickly. But the immediate impact and the continual improvement with a core group that was, hanging around the relegation zone, that has been playing like a top 4 team for almost we're getting close to a year at this point. Because they were great in the second half of last season once Eddie Howe came in too. This is what he does. It's just proportions, right? Look at what he did with Bournemouth. Now, you extend that out to the opportunity you have at Newcastle, and it lands you in a race for top 4, which is exactly where they are. That is one of the more confusing things of all of the narratives around coaches I've ever heard, is the hesitation about whether this was a good idea to hire Eddie Howe for Newcastle. So, wanted to give him his props. It's just something I don't get. He showed you at Bournemouth what he could do. Now you're giving him an even higher level of talent, and he's getting the same kind of results and maximizing all the players he's working with, because that's what he does. And now he also has the ability to be a little bit more compact and organized defensively because he's got that higher talent level to work with. And so now they're the best defensive team in the Premier League too. They are absolutely legit. I am all in. I said a couple weeks ago I still wanted to see a little bit more. You look at what happened to some of the other Big 6 clubs this weekend, and Newcastle just taking care of business casually. They are right. They are going to be there. We've reached a point. It's a Big 7. They're not going away anytime soon. Good, bad, like it, dislike it. It's the reality of the situation. And it's not just the money. Eddie Howe is a big, big, big reason why Newcastle have turned things around so quickly. That is all for the weekend roundup. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.